You can go ahead and grab a seat.
Morning to you. What's up? It's good to see you here today. Glad you're here because we're kicking off this series we do almost every year called CCC at the Movies. And if you've been around for long enough of a time, then you know when you smell popcorn in the lobby or see all the movie stand-ups all around the building, a whole bunch of you get really, really excited. You start foaming at the mouth, and with good reason. Like, this is a fun series to do. I love movies. I love going to the movies. I love watching movies. I love the whole movie theater experience. I especially love those souped-up movie theaters with the fancy pants, sound, Dolby Digital or whatever, or IMAX. I just love that. It's an incredible way to watch a movie. I do and always have enjoyed going to the movies. But we don't do this series because I like movies. We do this series for several reasons, though. Like, for starters, everybody loves a good story. Everybody. And essentially, movies are stories. It's kind of like universal language, movies are. Movies can speak to us and put on display in such creative and captivating ways, certain truths or perspectives that we can identify with and really absorb in a movie. But this series also gives us a different mode to articulate a biblical perspective and biblical truth and the gospel message. That's essentially what we're doing in this series. Like, we carefully select the movies, because not all movies are redeemable, But we carefully select these movies, and we recognize the gospel message within it. This series, it's a great way to launch a biblical discussion about faith and God and the gospel. And it's a whole lot of fun. It's a whole lot of fun along the way because most everybody I know loves a good movie. In fact, I'd love for you, if you're cool with this, or if you're just cool, I'd love for you to turn to the people you came with or the people that you're sitting next to and share with them a movie that you have seen, recently that you would say, this is a really good movie. Maybe like, your favorite movie you've seen over the last year or so. And maybe even why you thought it was a really good movie, all right? Ready, set, go. All right. Okay, for week number one of this year's CCC at the movies, for this first week, we have chosen a really action-packed, fun movie. It was released back in May of this year, so it sort of kicked off the lead-in to the summer movie season. It was actually just released on Disney Plus this past week. It's on all kinds of streaming platforms, so you could actually watch it this evening if you really, really wanted to. It was a critical and commercial success. It grossed over $845 million worldwide. It made it the second highest grossing movie of this year. It's in the superhero genre, if you couldn't tell from that little bumper that we showed there. There have been a lot of superhero movies in recent years. In fact, it's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is the 32nd film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is there anybody who has seen all 32 of the Marvel movies? Yes, hold your hand up high. Be proud of that. That's an accomplishment. This movie was written and directed by James Gunn. It had a star-studded cast with Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana and Dave Bautista and Karen Gillan and Vin Diesel and Bradley Cooper and Chukwudi Imuji, and even Sylvester Stallone was in it, all right? Any guesses what this movie is? Yeah, some of you know it's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Anybody see that movie by chance? Okay, a few of you have. How many of you have ever seen one of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies? So this is the third in a trilogy. They've been in several of the Marvel movies, but they got some history together. They got some history with us. And I think this particular movie, the third in the trilogy here, was probably the best in my opinion. But before we get into sort of the plot line and the message of the movie, there are a whole lot of characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy, and if you've never seen it before, you can get kind of lost in all these different characters. In fact, we got this group shot of them here, a whole lot of them, and I'd like to introduce them to you, kind of orient us a little bit. Some of the key players, not all of them, but some of the key players. For instance, Peter Quill is also known as Star-Lord, which is a really bad superhero name, and there's sort of a running joke throughout all the movies about that. Played by Chris Pratt. And he's sort of the leader of the Guardians throughout, their movies to this point. There's also Gamora, played by Zoe Saldana, and she's green. But she's this fierce, fierce warrior, and she's the daughter of Thanos. Some of you might remember Thanos. Thanos isn't in this movie, but Thanos used to be the big bad guy in the universe. The Avengers took care of him back in 2019. But she is the adopted daughter of Thanos. He is the one that made her into just a fierce warrior. But then they end up having a real difficult relationship, shall we say, all right? Because at one point, Thanos, again, her adopted father there, threw her off of a cliff to kill her, to trade her for an Infinity Stone, all right? And that'll really drive a wedge in a father-daughter relationship. Like, I'm no expert, but like parenting 101, dads, don't throw your daughter off a cliff for an Infinity Stone, all right? At least not any old Infinity Stone. Anyway, at one point, Peter Quill, Star-Lord, and Gamora here, they were a love interest together. But that sort of faded for different reasons, which we'll get into maybe in a little bit. Another character is Rocket. This is a raccoon. He's this raccoon he was experimented on, and he's genetically altered. He's this hot-tempered raccoon, voiced by Bradley Cooper. And Volume 3 is actually his origin story, and its most moving and powerful parts of this movie kind of circle around what goes on with Rocket. His main sort of sidekick is someone named Groot. It's voiced by Vin Diesel. All right? And Groot is essentially this giant tree, this living tree, but he only speaks 3 words the whole time. Do you know what they are? Yeah, you know what it is. I am Groot. Although he says all kinds of things, even though he's just saying those 3 words, we just don't speak his language, and we can't translate what he's saying through those 3 words. Another main character is Nebula, played by Karen Gillan. She is the blue sister of Thanos. She's also a daughter of Thanos, sister of Gamora, I should say. She is also a galactic warrior. She was experimented on a little bit, altered by Thanos when she was younger. He would have Gamora and Nebula spar against each other, and in order to even the odds in their sparring, he would, replace a part of Nebula with a sort of mechanical, machinery part. And so she's kind of part intelligent machine and as much as anything. And she plays a very significant role in this movie. There's Drax the Destroyer. Character in the universe. Another one is Mantis, or as Rocket referred to her, the chick with the antenna earlier in an Avengers movie. But she is an empath, and an empath is somebody who can sense others' emotions and feelings just by touching them. She can actually manipulate people's emotions and feelings. She can induce insomnia, which is pretty cool. All right, so she's like melatonin in a lot of ways. But she's a significant player. Now, the bad guy, the villain in Volume 3 of The Guardians is known as the High Evolutionary. Okay, and he's kind of this powerful creator of sorts. He's a scientist, a geneticist, and in a way, he seeks to evolve different life forms in hopes of creating a perfect species and a perfect planet and a perfect universe, a utopia. He's also got some other kind of freaky powers, able to manipulate matter and energy. But those are some of the characters, and the main players in the movie. Now, the basic plot line of the movie, okay, catch this. In the film, the Guardians embark on a mission to save and protect Rocket, the raccoon, from the High Evolutionary. All right, that's the basic plot line. All right, so let's check out the trailer, and then we'll go from there. The Guardians are trying to save and protect Rocket from the High Evolutionary. That's sort of the skeleton of the story of the movie. And there's this backstory to Rocket and the High Evolutionary. They have history together. See, the High Evolutionary, again, that geneticist, the scientist there, he's created several galactic races in his quest to design a more perfect universe. But if they're not on the path to perfect, then he destroys them and he moves on. And he is all about himself. He's all about his quest. He's all about his plan. He's all about his glory. He's just all about himself. And when the movie begins, Rocket, he gets injured. This happens real early on in the movie, critically wounded. And the Guardians spend the rest of the time trying to get what they need, specifically this kill switch override code that the High Evolutionary embedded in Rocket when he experimented on him when Rocket was just a baby raccoon. And they got to get this code to override this kill switch that's embedded in Rocket. And of course, the way that they go about trying to acquire the kill switch override code and save Rocket, it's pretty incredible. And we see their incredible abilities and powers on display. And the movie's definitely just fast-paced, it's frenetic, it's action-packed, no doubt. At times, it's a little dark. This one was a little more violent than some of the others. It's more violent in an alien superhero sort of way. Like you see a lot of alien ooze, and a tentacle, go flying from time to time that gets cut off. So a little more violent in that way. And the Guardian films, as you can kind of pick up from the trailer there, they've always managed to blend a whole lot of comedy in with a whole lot of action and a whole lot of heart. But this one, Volume 3, has more heart than the others. It has a whole lot of heart. Because Volume 3 is as much a story of belonging as it is superheroing. And it's as much about what it means to love and care for and walk with people in difficult times as much as it is about saving Rocket. And Gamora, she plays a key role in us coming to see this in the movie, all right? Again, Gamora, the Green Warrior, daughter of Thanos, plays a critical role in Volume 3 because it's through her eyes that we're able to see the Guardians. Almost for the first time, we're able to see the Guardians. And everyone seems so mystified that Gamora is alive. Again, didn't her father, Thanos, throw her off that cliff, as in Avengers Infinity War? And then she shows back up in Avengers Endgame, and I know that can be confusing for those of you who may not have seen the movies. It's confusing for them in the movie, all right? They're confused by Gamora because she's not the same Gamora they used to have that used to travel around with them. But for Gamora, there's even more of a mystery how her previous version of herself even wound up with these folks who she doesn't think very much of. She doesn't remember being with them before. Like, this Gamora never fell in love with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and she certainly never fell in love with Peter Quill, Star-Lord, and she wonders what made her, compelled her to actually do such a thing. I mean, Quill's so goofy. And the rest of the Guardians are pretty strange to her as well. Like, Drax calls himself a destroyer, but he doesn't do much destroying. And Mantis seems about as dangerous as a Pomeranian puppy, And the tree guy, Groot, like, he's certainly big, but his vocabulary could use some expanding, Nebula, Gamora's adopted sister, she thinks Nebula's gone soft, to be traveling around the galaxy with a group of misfits like this. And so Gamora's ready to blow this pop stand. She's like, I got to get out of here. And when Gamora essentially demands that Nebula should help her leave this pack of misfit superheroes, Gamora, she sort of pulls the ultimate card when she says to Nebula, she says, "We're family," to Nebula, her sister, And Nebula tells her, "So are they." And she really means it. And so even though Gamora wants to leave, she stays. The Guardians need her. They need her help to get the code to turn off that kill switch and save Rocket. And they pay really well. That's her main motivation. And so she sticks around to help them. Even though all this talk about friendship and family and love are just, to her, they're just words for weakness. That's all it is to her. But, because she sticks around, she sees and begins, again, to appreciate the Guardians of the Galaxy and their sacrifice for each other, and their commitment to each other, and their love to each other, and their affection for each other, and their connection with one another. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to her. It's beautiful to us. I mean, the most moving parts, for sure, center around Rocket. But some of my favorite moments in the film were when Gamora realizes and appreciates what the Guardians are and how they function as this community. Like, don't get me wrong, like, the Guardians, they kind of fight with each other as much as they fight with the bad guys, in the universe. But what's on display in this movie mainly is the contrast between community and individualism. What's on display in this movie is the contrast between the beauty and importance of community and the selfishness and emptiness of individualism. The plot is to save and protect Rocket from the High Evolutionary, but the heart of this movie is about the value of living in community. Now think about this for a second. Like, what's on display through all these crazy creatures of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the action and adventure of the Guardians of the Galaxy, it's the power and beauty and design of belonging to a community and the power of connectedness is really what bleeds through. And this is a value, and it's really a truth that's emphasized in this movie, but it's a value and a truth that's emphasized throughout the gospel. And it is to be experienced in the church, I want you to understand. We understand this. See, just like the body's nourished by food, the soul is nourished by people. And more than anything else, we're shaped by people. Some people They help me live as God intends me to live. You know, they see the best of me when I can't see it. They cheer me on as I grow weary and moving toward that. They get in my face when I'm not living up to it. They encourage me when I'm tempted to give up. God uses people to form people. It's how He planned it. It's how you are wired. It's how I am wired. It's how everyone on the planet is wired. See, it's how God set the whole thing up. The very foundation of the universe. Before the universe was formed, God existed beautifully, lovingly, perfectly as a triune community. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that's why it's so powerful. It's why we long for community so much, because it's hot-wired into us. It's why the movie moves us so much when it's on display before us. You know, this is so much a part of us that researchers, when they look at what distinguishes quite happy people with less happy people, one factor that consistently separates the two groups, happy people, less happy people, it's not how much money they have, it's not their health, it's not their security, it's not their attractiveness, it's not their IQ. What distinguishes consistently happier people from less happy people is the presence of rich, deep, joy-producing, life-changing, meaningful relationships. Spending intentional time with people who genuinely care about us is indispensable to human flourishing. Social researcher Robert Putnam, he writes this: the single most common finding from a half-century's research on life satisfaction, not only from the U.S. but from around the world, is that happiness is best predicted by the breadth and depth of one's social connections. See, part of what it means to be made in God's image is our capacity for connectedness and community. Like the Apostle Paul, he paints a picture of that connectedness in writing to the church in Ephesus when he says that they are being rooted and established in love, which is a phenomenal phrase, rooted and established in love. Like when a tree puts roots into the ground, those roots are able to take in nutrients and water, and the tree grows and has life and has strength, but only if it's rooted. And in the same way, we're rooted and our souls are nourished in the love of God and other people. Like when somebody cares about you through words or through touch or through listening or through prayer together, or whenever there's an exchange of genuine caring, it's as if the roots of your soul are getting fed, and every life has to have that connectedness. And that's on display for us in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Love for each other. See, we flourish when we're connected to God and when we're connected to His people. And when we are not, we languish. When we're disconnected, we flounder, you see. Did you know that emotionally isolated people are more prone to things like depression and anxiety and low self-esteem and substance abuse and sexual addiction? Difficulties with eating and sleeping are tied to that. People who are socially disconnected are between 4 and 5 times more likely to die from any cause than those who have close ties to family, friends, and other relationships. In fact, check this out. People who have bad health habits, like smoking, overeating, elevated blood pressure, physical inactivity, but still remain connected, they actually live longer than people who have great health habits, but are disconnected. Again, Robert Putnam, he made this staggering comment. He said, as a rough rule of thumb, if you belong to no groups, but you decide to join one, you cut your risk of dying over the next year and a half. If you just join one group, which is why our motto this fall for small groups around here at CCC is, join a small group or die. All right? That's what we're going with. We're playing around with it. Yeah? No? Spiritually, as the Apostle John says in 1 John in the Bible, he says, anyone who does not love remains in death. So like when we live in isolation, we're more likely to give in to things like temptation and discouragement. We're more likely to be self-absorbed. I mean, we're just designed to flourish in connectedness. And it doesn't mean that we all got to become extroverts, You can be very, very shy. You can be very, very reserved as a person, but you can still have deep relationships. Flourishing in connectedness to other people means you value it, you prioritize it, you cultivate certain relationships. And the movie, again, the plot line is to save Rocket, the raccoon, from the high evolutionary. But the heart of this movie is that they prioritize it. They sacrifice for each other. They care for each other genuinely. And that's in contrast to the high evolutionary who's all about himself. See? You know, one of the marks of the early church was their commitment to connectedness, because they knew that connectedness and community, it just doesn't happen on its own. They intentionally met together. They ate together. They prayed together. They worshiped together. It was part of the rhythm of their life. It was part of the rhythm of their week. And somewhere along the line, over time, that value began to fade. And so the writer of the book of Hebrews in the Bible, he said this: let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. That last phrase, he's saying, in other words, stay committed to Christian community. Stay committed to the fellowship of the church. But somewhere along the line, this value has faded in our day too. And I so very much appreciated how the movie valued this. Guardians of the Galaxy, they prized community and relationships. You know, one of my sons, I was actually surprised a little bit. My oldest son, Daniel, he had come back into town back in, I don't know if it was the end of May or June, but he went with some friends to see this movie, and I hadn't seen it yet. And when he came home from the movie, I said, hey, how was the movie? You know, without giving any of the plot line away, how was the movie? And he said, it was awesome. And he said, I cried. That's what he said. In Guardians of the Galaxy, I cried, he said, which was shocking to me, because this is my kid who loved all those, you know, horror, you know, cut 'em up, scary, just bloody movies. Those are the kind of movies he liked, kind of stoic in that way. And he said, I cried throughout the movie. It was so touching to me. Now, I went and saw it, and I can neither confirm nor deny whether or not I shed a tear. But if I did, it was when the beauty of community and belonging came shining through the big screen. Philip Yancey wrote, Christianity is not a purely intellectual internal faith. It can only be lived in community. I would say life can only be lived in community. He writes, church has filled in me a need that could not be met in any other way. See, every day, everyone you know faces life with eternity on the line. And life has a way of beating people up, doesn't it? Pushing them down. And every life needs a cheering section. And every life needs a shoulder to lean on once in a while. And every life needs a prayer to lift them up before God. And every life needs somebody to wrap their arms around them sometimes. Every life needs to hear somebody say to them, hey, don't give up. Don't you give up. St. John of the Cross, he wrote, the virtuous soul that is alone is like the burning coal that is alone. It will grow colder rather than hotter. And he is right. He is definitely right. What we see in the Guardians is this quote on display. Okay? The coal burning by himself is the high evolutionary. All about himself, all about his agenda, his glory. He's alone, essentially, living what he thinks is some supreme existence. But he's just growing colder and colder and colder with every passing day. And that's in contrast to the richness, the fabric of the Guardians, the community of the Guardians, that is so attractive and moving and life-giving and just fun. Like I said, this movie is a whole lot of fun. Action-packed for sure as they try to save Rocket. But as we see their bonds of connectedness and community and care, it's just beautiful. So, question for you on this first week of CCC at the Movies 2023. Which of those ways does your life reflect more? Like when you think of the picture of the high evolutionary, pretty much all alone, doing his own thing, right? Own agenda, it's about himself, very selfish, very self-centered. Like, does your life more look like that? Or the connectedness of the Guardians? Even though it's messy, even though it's difficult, even though they don't always get along with each other, They're still fighting for it. They're still sticking together. They're still loving each other. Or maybe you're like Gomorrah, and you're kind of on the sidelines, and you're a little skeptical for whatever reason. Maybe you've been hurt in the past. Maybe you've been hurt by the people you're trying to connect with. And you're just uncertain about it all, you know? Which would you say your life reflects more of? One of my concerns that I see as I look around our church is for so many, the intensity of the passion you have for God just fades. It fizzles out because you're not connected. I know a whole lot of folks who have fizzled out or just slammed the brakes on their faith and relationship with God because they put being relationally connected in a Christ-centered group on the back burner, and they're just going it alone. And what they're doing is they're acting like the only spiritual dynamic is them and God. Some of you are acting like the only spiritual dynamic is you and God. And there are significant spiritual consequences for that. So listen, with as much gentleness as I can muster up, you know, but as directly as I can say this, don't be a casualty around this. Get in community, live in community. Don't be isolated. Don't go it alone. Get intentional about Christ-centered relationships, because it's one of the most important parts of being human. But you got to prize it, and you got to prioritize it, and you got to commit to it no matter what. You got to fight for it. You got to make it a goal in your life to have life-giving relationships. You know, for some of you, the first step is just to kind of accept that this is how God made you. This is how God made every person on the planet. And so just cooperate with how God wired you. I would also say make the most of the opportunities that our church offers around here. You know, I know a whole lot of people who connect because they serve together. You know, they meet people, they start showing up, they start logging time, they get some history with people, and they start making bonds with these folks. And they start looking forward to seeing each other as much as they do serving, you know. And if you've never taken that step, maybe that's a step for you. At the end of this month, we have something called a volunteer tour where you kind of get a behind the scenes of all these different ways that people serve around here. It's a great first step. Doesn't commit you to anything. It takes like 15 minutes, you know. Volunteer tour. Some of you ought to jump into a group. You know, groups over the next month and a half, they're going to kick up again and have sort of a ministry year season where they start in the fall and they run, you know, through part of the fall and then take a break, then they run again, you know, at the turn of the year. You need to jump into a group. And I don't care if you're young or old, doesn't matter to me. This principle doesn't end because you hit a certain age. And, you know, we start it very, very young. You know, if you're a student or if you have a student or if you're the parent of a young life, I would say, you know, get your middle schooler, your high schooler, your elementary schooler, you know, in our student and children's ministry. Get them in a circle where there are other folks speaking into their lives. I can assure you the day will come when you wish they were in that environment, around that circle. And the longer you wait, if you wait around until you kind of they feel like going or you feel like going or investing in this way, it's just going to be too late. And I've seen it 1,000 times over, man. One of the best things you can do is get them in a place where over time God uses that group to connect your son or your daughter to a leader or another person in that group, and something connects with them and gives them this fresh vision for what faith can be and what it can look like in their life. Don't wait until it's too late. We have this young adult group that's going gangbusters, my understanding, on Thursday evenings. So much so they're, you know, launching another one. You're post-high school, 20-something, that's the place to go, you know. And listen, this isn't about some church program. It's about teeing up the potential for relationships that God could use in an extraordinary, difference-making kind of way in your life. And this is about your survival. It's about you making it as a Jesus follower. See? If you're somebody who's been around for a while, maybe a few years or so, and you regularly do the service here on the weekend. Maybe you've taken part in some events around here, like Pizzageddon we had last week. Wasn't that a blast if you were here? Yeah. We might have some leftover pizza from last week if you want to help yourself. But maybe you've taken part in some events, but you just continue to resist jumping into a group, serving or meeting with people, and you got your reasons, and believe me, I've heard them all. I've heard them all. But I unashamedly challenge you to take a step. Fill out the CCC card, make a call, send an email, have a conversation, send a text, tell somebody, help me get in a group. Some of you filled it out before or sent the message before, and for whatever reason it fizzled out, well, send it again. Don't let any excuse derail this part of your life. And again, the next month and a half or so, this is a perfect time to start exploring that and figure it out so that post-Labor Day, you're ready to rock and roll. Some of you don't need to fill anything out. You just need to start going to the group you're already welcome to. You know somebody who's in a small group. You may even know when they meet. And you've been invited to it, and you just need to start showing up, or you just need to start showing up more consistently to get in the path of this way that God designed you and hot-wired into you. And some of you don't need to be looking for a group. You need to lead it. You need to be the one to say, all right, I'm going to step in. I'm going to wave the flag. There is such a need for leaders around here, couples, men and women, to take up this mantle to prioritize this platform of group life and connection, you see. And you might be the one to step into that. And you might even know some people who are not connected, and you know them, and you say, let's pull together. Let's start meeting, If you're really connected to people, if you're surrounded by some Christ-centered friends, and you're meeting together and sharing your life, and you're helping each other out, then I would encourage you to thank them for being a part of your life sometime today. If they're in this room, before you leave, before you take a picture, at that little photo opportunity out in the lobby, or before you go seeking out some, stand up out there to take a picture, before you roll out to go get brunch or whatever, pull them aside and just say, thanks for being a part of my life. Thanks for investing in me and allowing me to invest in you. Let's keep doing this, This is a hallmark sign of Christians, gang, that as a Jesus follower, you bond with other Jesus followers.